On today's More Than a Test, we have Chris Hoffman from Elk Grove in Northern California. He's been the superintendent there for a while, and an exciting conversation for me for a couple of reasons. The first thing is they are a district that is growing. He talks about the many schools they are in the process of building and will continue to build over the next few years. And that's really exciting because in so many places we talk to superintendents who are having decreased enrollment. So it's exciting to see what expansion looks like. Additionally, he goes really deep on what it means to be relationship based, to be goals based, and to also train your board to be like that. So often we don't think about the fact that boards and unions need the same training our teachers, our entire community, and all of our leaders need. And so he really talks about how investing that time in relationships, investing it and getting on the same page really paid off when he went into the pandemic and made some pretty big decisions. So it's a really great story today on More Than a Test. Hey, Chris, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so before the show started, you and I were chatting about how I'd had a superintendent on from a very small district last week. And this week, I'm talking to you, the largest school district in Northern California. Tell me a little bit about Elk Grove.
Elk Grove, so 320 square miles, so we're geographically large, very diverse. We have a wide range of students from many, many backgrounds. We currently have 68 schools that we use to serve our 63,000 kids. And the thing that kind of makes people fall out of their chair from time to time is we have 60 more schools to build where we physically know where they're going to go already. And if the city of Elk Grove continues to grow, then it'll probably be another dozen on top of that. So yeah, we'll be in a growth mode for a long time.
I want to repeat that. 60 more schools? I think I was just shocked, honestly. I think I froze because I was shocked. I can't believe that. Okay, I have to tell you two things that I hear in Colorado. First of all, I hear that everybody from California is moving to Colorado, and that's why our traffic is so bad. All of our school districts are declining in size.
Yep.
How is it possible that you have 60 more schools to build?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Part of it is just the sheer scale. We're in Northern California, outside of the Bay Area, so we do have it. So from a affordability standpoint, housing, while people would tell you they're too expensive compared to other parts of the state, we do have affordability in that world. So that's very helpful for us as well. But we have 3 cities that we serve: Southern Sacramento, the city of Elk Grove, the city of Rancho Cordova, which is a really growing city, and so it's just kind of the nature of where we geographically where we're located that's kind of lead to all that growth down the road.
And when you look at that plan for 60 more schools, you'll have 60 more schools complete when?
That's the magic question. We're currently working on our facility master plan, which will be kind of the roadmap for what we're going to be doing with our schools over the next 10 years. And that includes upgrades to our existing schools to make sure that they're up to our new school standards. But in that same time, we'll build a high school, middle school, pretty confident about that, and probably 4 to 6 elementary schools in that next 10-year period. So the 30's way down the road, but it is just part of the reality of as we're planning things, we're having to make sure we're thinking long-term with that kind of work.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions about that, because when I think about in Colorado, I feel like we're constantly announcing this school gets an upgrade because it got a bond or whatever. And it feels like almost everything is like barely thought about. We're just like, tomorrow that school gets, but you're talking about years in advance. How can you possibly have that kind of forecasting and like, how do you plan for that and also run your district? It's not like you have like the guy the guy for next 10 years and you, it's just you.
Right. Well, I have a great team is the way we pull it off. And so direction from the board, number one, and then number two, my cabinet team, and then the folks that are directly supporting them. In the role of superintendent, there's things that happen on a daily basis that I'm responsible for and I have to respond to. We had a meltdown of one of our generators in the building on Thursday. We had to shut down the building for 2 days. So I had to deal with that. But most of my work and most of my time is spent thinking about what's happening in 2 years, what's happening in 5 years, what's happening in 10 years. That's the role in my perspective of the superintendent. We have really good systems in place. We have really good people in place who are doing the day-to-day and getting the teaching and learning and pulling out the football games and making sure the buses arrive on time and all those things that happen every single day. But most of my work is thinking about and planning for what's coming and setting us up uh, for a successful future. I'm kind of in a interesting place in my career. I'm much closer to the end of it than I am the beginning. So I'm very reflective about how I've gotten to where I am and investing in the people I've had over, I've invested in over the years. But I constantly have this itch that of impatience that I've got to get these things done before the end of my career so that things are set up for the next leadership group as they do the work. So it's just an important concept, and maybe a little bit unique to Elk Grove. We're not thinking about 2.5, 3 year superintendent cycles. I'm the sixth superintendent since 1959, so I've been here 10 years, and that's just about hitting a little short of average for superintendents in Elk Grove. So it's a little bit different environment than most.
And I really appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate that, I think a lot of people towards the end of their career, like, how do I just get out of here? Like, how do I sail out? And you're still trying to set up the next people for success. And I
Yeah.
think, let me ask you a little bit about your students.
Yeah.
I've driven through that part of California. What I know is like there's a lot of agriculture, a lot of space between the cities. Tell me about the kids that are attending your schools.
Yeah, we serve just a wide range of students. When you talk about diversity, oftentimes people think about one dominant group and a second group. We don't have any group within Elk Grove Unified that's more than 20% of the population. So it's I think we're the seventh most diverse district in the entire country. Was one of the latest stats that came out. So very different than most places, and we serve brand new newcomers to the country. We have we're kind of a landing spot in this area for folks coming from right now. Afghanistan's one of our big landing spots. And so that's and then we always have that piece in place. We also have people that have been here generationally for families as well. So it's a very diverse group of folks, socially, economically, ethnically, and we figure out a way to make it work here. We're big, I said 63,000 kids, but I think something we've done in 7,500, 8,000 adults. We've somehow held on to kind of a small town feel with regards to the work we do here, and that's a tribute to the leadership of the board, my cabinet team, and every one of our schools and the people that are doing the work every day. So it's a unique place for sure.
It sounds like in 10 years that you've been there, it's changed quite a bit. The kids have changed, the people there, and the things that you're facing are similar across the country, but that your mix has changed. How has your leadership changed to meet the needs?
Yeah, so I've changed as a leader a lot over the years, for sure, and we'll speak to this a little bit later down the road, I believe, with regards to uh, books and things that I read that have had some influences on me. But I'm much more open to the humanity of each person that I engage with every single day, and there's a term called the outward mindset, and so. It's not about me. It's about the work we're doing for our kids. My limited view of the world and my career will be a complete waste if this turns out to be untrue. But my basic belief is we're here to improve outcomes for kids, academically, socially, emotionally, the whole gamut. We're here for that. The only way I know how to do that is if we, the adults, get better at the work we do, because the expectation is each adult is bringing their best selves to work every single day. So they're giving all they know how to do. And so the only way the kids are performing to that level. So the only way for the kids to perform to a new level is if we, the adults, get better at the work we do. So we spend a lot of time developing, investing in the adults so they can better serve our kids.
I had Kareem Weaver on, and he said, we have to take care of the big people so that they can take care of the little people.
Right.
But I'll tell you something. I work in ed tech. Obviously, I work for Amira Learning, and they host a podcast. And one of the things I think I hear the most, and I don't necessarily believe, but I hear is that teachers are afraid of change, right? That they don't want to change. They don't want to do these things. And so what I hear you saying is like, we have to get better and better and better. How do you get that to teachers from your role so that they receive it and they want to do it with you?
Yeah, everybody's afraid of change. I mean, that's a universal because change is hard. We're comfortable I think just as human beings, we get into our routines and what we do. So I think part of it is I'm very clear that that is the expectation, is that we're investing in developing people, and we keep it pretty focused. It's not a a new idea every year. We've gone very deep into some pretty core work, and I think that helps people as well. We're not changing for change's sake. We've identified some really core pieces that we think are that make a difference, and that's where we spend our time. So we are expecting people to get better, but it's not necessarily quote unquote change, but it's investing in people so they can do better work
So
with the kids they serve.
give me an example of a core area that you've gone after.
So one of the core works I spoke to a little bit early, it's the outward mindset work that we've done with the Arbinger Institute. And I was introduced to this work probably 8.5 years ago. And it was the first work that I came across that had a direct impact on me as a husband, as a father, and as a leader. And the basic premise of the book is, can you see the humanity of each person you encounter on a daily basis? Do you know what their hopes, dreams, and challenges are? And can you align your work in a way that will allow you to get what you need to get done, but do that work with the hopes, dreams, and challenges of the people you work with and for in mind? I ended up, reading this book. Had a Again, it had the impact on me. I was relatively new to the district. I came in November, and then the next August I was getting ready for my first cabinet retreat, which means we got a boardroom at the attorney's office. Looked at a brick wall.
Fancy.
That's what a true retreats mean in education. But I met there with my new cabinet team, and I'd given them the book ahead of time. I said, "Hey, why don't you take a look and read through it?" And they did, most of them, I think. And but there was a little hesitation. But then somebody kind of did this big share in front of everybody, and it got a little bit contagious. And so they do it. And so we stopped the conversation. It was good, the good start. And people are like, "Oh, I'm going to go buy 25 copies of it and share it with my team." I said, "Don't do that. Let's come back in a couple of weeks and talk about this again and see." Giving a couple of people a chance to read back through it again. We came back a couple weeks later, a couple more insights, and I asked the question, if someone from the Arbinger Institute was here today and watched our conversation, what do you think they'd say? My people are pretty proud of themselves. Like, wow, they'd be impressed with our analysis and our ability to synthesize the information. I said, well, they might say that. They might also say, thanks for reading the book, and you understood A and B, but did you ever think about C and D? I said, I think there's something deeper here than just, what I didn't want to have happen was to turn into a book of the month club and then it go away. So then we started a new group called Partners in Education, which we have 7 labor units in our district. And so it was 2 leaders from each of the units. We came together and they read the book and came to a similar conclusion. Actually had a teacher, a paraeducator, ask a teacher after we got done reading the book, "Hey, do you remember that we worked together several years ago?" Blah, 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 blah. And the teacher's like, "Well, I don't remember that at all." She goes, "I know you never saw me in all those years. You never saw me." And so I'm like, "Oh, that didn't go over great." About 3 weeks later, we got back together and kind of talking through the book again. And this teacher said, "I need to share something before we get started." And I'm like, "Okay, this might go a little sideways." And she stood up and looked at the paraeducator and said, "I apologize for not seeing you. The last 3 weeks I've been on my campus, and I used to go from my car to my mailbox to the copy room to my office, and I didn't look up. I just did what I needed to do. Well, I looked up the last 3 weeks, and my campus is beautiful. It's grown up around me, and I missed it." And she goes, "And I've seen people that I've never seen before." And she goes, "So not seeing people will never happen again." So then she apologized to the woman for visiting. So we took that and went to our board and said, "This is something we think more people should learn." So they gave us originally about $300,000 to do some more training. We did some more training with leaders from the units and also from the district. And ultimately, when we did our labor agreements that following year, every one of the labor agreements had a clause that said all members of this unit will be trained in the Arbinger outward mindset. And
Wow.
so this was pre-pandemic. At that point, we actually got to a point where we had trained about 3,000 people within the district in this work. Pandemic kind of blew it up a little bit, and we're rolling back into it again. But I think that investment in the people is part of what got us through the pandemic in the way we did. So that's one example. We're still doing the Arbinger work today. It's still a core tenet of what we do. And it really is about seeing the humanity of each person you engage with on a daily basis, and how do we do our work with that in mind.
You hit so many things that I've heard before. I know Susan Enfield once told us that she wanted every child to be known by their name, their strength, and their area of growth. I love that you talked about like your labor union and how like you bring those people in. I think labor unions and boards are so underappreciated as far as the fact that they need training. They
Yep.
need like they get these roles and no one tells them how they're supposed to like interact.
Yep.
The need for relationships I hear about all the time. But this is so tangible. I actually I did grad school at Stanford, and there's a class at the Stanford Business School that like is dubbed touchy feely, which is somewhat the same about being able to share and give. So I have to ask you, can you tell me, and I'm sure that you have long answers, but shorter answers of your hope, your dream, and your challenge that you might that like you face today at least might not be your main answer, but one of your answers.
Yeah, I mean, in the right in front of me right now is coming out of the pandemic. We have about 300 positions that we put into place during the pandemic because we had the federal one-time dollars to do so, that we think are game changer services. So increased social workers, counselors, academic intervention teachers are just some phenomenal. Some of the things we always wanted to be able to do. So we didn't do pandemic specific things. We expanded on things that we knew were already working. And so we have 300 of these people working for us right now. Those funds go away in June of this year. The state did give us one-time funds to continue some of this work. And so we have an agreement with all of our units and our board that we're going to keep these positions in place for the next 2 years through June of 26, while we are evaluating which of those are having the greatest impact, because we're going to have to make a decision on which of those we're going to be able to find a way to make ongoing long term. So all within that is hope, dream, and challenge, all in one thing. And my hope is we can keep this going. The dream is we're doing things in our school district that we only dreamed of being able to do previously because we didn't have the people to be able to do it. The challenge is how do we make this our new norm so that it's just part of our fabric moving forward. So that's just an example of what's kind of right in front of me right now.
It's such a perfect example because everyone's talking about the ESSER funding cliff and these things they don't have longer have funding. It's lovely to hear that you have optimism about the things that you got to try and that
Right.
they could be the future reality. And I think this is part of why you are such a gosh, like I feel like so many other districts follow you. When I said that you were coming on the podcast, I asked other superintendents. They were like, "Oh man, he's someone to watch. He's someone to whatever he's doing will do." And I know we talked at one point about how you led through the pandemic. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a little crazy. So I get credit for being the first district, I think in California, maybe wider, to close down. The reality is we actually didn't close down first. Many districts closed down before us. But what we did do is based on some information, I'll kind of go through the how we got there. But what we actually did was move up spring break about 4 weeks because I had the power to adjust the calendar if I could get my teachers union to agree to it. So what we really did is we took a 1 week break because we just didn't have enough information. So this is what happened. Friday afternoon, we're dealing with what's going on. COVID's kind of run around. We're thinking about, and my assistant soup for elementary ed comes and said, "We just got a call from the county health department, and we have a family in our district that has grandparents who got off one of the cruise ships that docked in San Francisco Bay that was COVID that had COVID. It was 2 weeks ago. They live with one of their children and spouse and 4 kids. The grandparents have tested positive for COVID and all the other family members have symptoms. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what we need to do, so we pulled the meeting together that evening with the health department and the whole piece, and so we found out we had kids at three schools, and they had been in school for the last 2 weeks with symptoms. And so my question to our health director, who was phenomenal, Dr. Kasiri, helped us through a great deal. I said, so when are we going to test the kids? He says, well, we can't test the kids because there's not enough tests. So at the time, tests were really hard to find, and they were only testing seniors at the time. I said, well, if we don't test the kids, how do we know if they're sick or not? Well, you have to assume they're positive. So I learned a new term. So we assumed positive for COVID. So then tell me what this means is that I have two kids at one elementary school, a kid at a middle school, and a kid at a high school who were assuming positive and have been interacting with their classmates for the past 2 weeks. She said yes. I go, so what do we do? And she's like, well, we might want to close this one school and think about this other school. So we left that night about 8:30, 9 o'clock, not exactly knowing what we were going to do. But we were going to come back together at 8 o'clock the next morning. So I didn't sleep that night, thinking through about 2 in the morning. I texted my attorney, Karen. She's phenomenal. She actually texted me back like an hour and a half later. I said, can I change the calendar? Because I was trying to think, what could I do? I needed time. And she said, you can if you get the union to sign off. So we got the team back together again. And we had, part of the challenge was at the high school specifically. The young lady had been on campus the student had been on campus for the 2 weeks, had interacted with dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of kids. And we were getting ready to have a basketball game in the playoffs, and a team from the Bay Area was going to come and play our team of the school with this positive test. And I had this vision of the epicenter of the pandemic was Elk Grove Unified, because the team came into our gym, we infected them, and then they went back to the Bay Area and blew up the Bay Area. So we made the decision. I got on the phone and talked to all 7 of my board members. My team got on the phone and talked to the leaders of all 7 of the labor unions. And within about 45 minutes, we came back together and said, okay, we trust this is the right thing to do. And all we did was we moved up spring break 1 week, changed the calendar so we'd have more time. We fought with the upper leadership of the county, and one of their folks said, well, this is really just going to be a chickenpox party. Everyone just needs to get infected, and then this will be over. Well, that's not going to work. The teacher of one of these kids is a cancer survivor who's 65 years old, and she's been in the classroom with these kids for the past 2 weeks. Chickenpox party doesn't work. So we made the decision to change the calendar for the week. Obviously, some more information came along early in that week, and I think most folks were closed down by Wednesday or Thursday. We actually pulled the special board meeting together on that Friday, and that's when we officially closed. So I always say we were actually one of the last districts to close, but it was the right thing to do. And I think tying things back together, the work we did with the outward mindset, and that development of the relationship with the board and the labor leaders, they had enough trust. Nobody knew, and I said this out loud on the Friday we made the decision. The best case scenario is I'm wrong, and that we shouldn't do this, and we are overreacting, because I got crushed. I mean, the Sunday afterwards,
Oh man, parents
all the
with trips
local
changed.
all the local politicians all came together. The parents of the basketball team called me a racist, and the only reason I didn't want these kids to get scholarships, that's why I was doing this. The mayor said I went too far. County supervisor said didn't know what he was doing, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I had more information than most had because of the family that was directly involved with this, and then we had to figure out a way to help our people. So that's what we did.
Wow. Okay. I have such a great story. What I love about the story is like you talk about each individual person and how like your doctor, the health person, the lawyer, the labor. It's very clear that relationships were very much a part of your success. And I'm just so amazed, and I could not imagine one being creative enough to think to change the calendar, two to be able to think that your labor union would go with you. I mean, I know there are superintendents listening right now being like, my labor union would never do that. And then, but so I have to know though, two questions come to me is like, one, when everyone is attacking you, like, what did you do? Like when they're all telling you you're wrong, were you just like, I mean, I can't even imagine how much sleep you lost. And then afterwards, did you ever get to be like, hashtag told you so? Or do you have to leave that on the table for those relationships?
Yeah. So I do over my shoulder. I have a little picture, Dr. Martin Luther King, and that it's always the right time to do the right thing. So it was the right thing. And on Monday when I had a meeting with all the other superintendents and no one else had done anything yet, and they're all like, "Chris, we think you went too far, too fast." I said, "I get it. We need more information. I know my kids are safe today because they're not all together, and we'll see where this thing goes. But I just need more time with the information I have. We just need more time." And we dealt with. I have really good leaders on my cabinet, and we've worked through some really challenging times. And they'll come in from time to time. Chris, is this the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? And inevitably they'll say, well, yes, okay. Then we'll work through all the noise and everything else that's going through it. But we have to be committed to uh, doing the right work, and it's not proving yourself right, but are we doing what's in the best interest of our kids, the best interest of our staff, whatever the decision is, and this was one that was in front of us in the moment. Now, the "I told you so." I didn't do it. A lot of people said, actually, one of the reporters for the SACB, he wrote this scathing, just blew me up article. This is exactly what leadership shouldn't do, overreact, blah, 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 blah. And he came back and actually wrote an article later and said, hey, he was right. It was the right decision. And I overstepped now. So that was right. But what you do find out in those kinds of moments is who your friends really are. Man, my running joke is I don't have a lot of them, uh, but I know who they are, and when it hits the fan, they don't go anywhere. And those folks didn't go anywhere. They rallied up around us, and we, worked our way through it.
Wow, that's really impressive. It's interesting I haven't seen all these articles about you being wrong, but I have read a lot about you online. And when you read about you on like the Elk Grove website, it feels like there's a lot of pride about who you are. That you went to elementary and middle school in Elk Grove. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's a little interesting. So I did. I graduated from Valley High School in the district. I went to middle school, eighth grade. So eighth grade, I was there, and in kindergarten, I went to Limbach, which is one of our schools, and I went to Charles Mack for sixth grade. But between kindergarten and eighth grade, I went to six different schools. So my dad was a banker, so we moved every 2 years, and then my parents divorced, and back and forth and through all that. So I was in and out of this area, but from eighth grade on, I've been here the whole time. Valley High School. This were this is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. The people there. It was the right place for me at the right time. Um, and there were incredible people that were there, and my group of friends. It's ridiculous, but we call it we're the fellas. And I think I may have one college friend that I met in college. The other guys they are the fellas, and they are the most diverse group of dudes you've ever seen. And we get together and walk down the street there. Where did those guys come from? And we came from South Sacramento, Valley High School, and that experience there is the reason I went back and coached and I taught, and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing and giving back to who I'm giving back to. So it is the work. I'll do the moment when I actually got my first teaching job, and I taught at Valley High School, so the place where I graduated from.
Oh wow.
So I was coaching there during college, and I did my student teaching, and I actually got hired. And Mr. Schmicky, God rest his soul, was my U.S. history teacher. and he hired me for my first teaching job. And Mr. Schmidtke, when I had him for U.S. history teacher, it was the Reagan-Dukakis election, and I literally told, I think you're the only person in the United States that voted for Dukakis because Reagan, I was a Reagan, Reagan, I crushed the dude for for weeks and months probably, and but I love the man, and he hired me for the position, and he's like, so he goes, congratulations. He goes, well, and he goes, well, thank you, Mr. Schmidt. He goes, you can call me Ralph now. Oh, okay, Ralph. That's a little bit odd, but I ran down to the science department, and Mr. Lum had somehow gotten me through chemistry. And so I said, Mr. Lum, I'm a teacher now, so thank you so much. He said, oh, you can call me Bob. And I'm like, okay, Bob, that's still a little bit weird. And then I go down to the PE department, and my former football coach was now the athletic director. And hey, coach, I'm hired of the coach. And I sit there, and he's, oh, you can call me Frank. And I say, well, coach, that's never going to happen because that relationship was just different. And so the relationships that when my boys are with me, and now they're men and off to, but when they were younger, we'd run into former players and or kids that I had engaged with in the past, and uh, beautiful people doing really good work, but very deferential to me. And the kid will walk away, and my kid will go, Daddy, that man loves you, and I go, yeah, and I love him too. And that's that's part of the that's part of the work and what we do. So there's a lot of moments and people that made a huge difference in my life. But being able to be back there and teach there, that kind of summed up all of that work.
I'm sure they're all really proud of you now. And what I love about that story is you sounded so proud to be a teacher. You just couldn't wait to tell them, "Look, I'm a teacher
Right.
now." So
Yep.
tell me, how does it change from being like how did your trajectory turn from being so proud to just be a teacher and now you're standing at the top job?
I think leadership, if you ask folks around me, leadership is something that's kind of come naturally to me. Ridiculous, but as captain of the football team, there's just those are things that kind of happen. And so I always had an interest in doing leadership roles. What I experienced was people in these different roles, in vice principal roles, in principal roles. And what I used to think to myself is, um, where I am right now, I'm having an impact on the kids in my class every single day and the kids I'm coaching. And I know that because they tell me, and I can see it. My question was always, can you have that impact from this next level? So as a vice principal, I saw highly skilled people doing that work and still having direct impact on kids. And I saw principals able to do that. So before I took the next step anywhere, I always asked myself, can you directly impact kids from that position? And so that was part of the thought process. The other thing I've come to realize, and I share this, I meet with each new principal as we hire new principals. And one of the things I let them know is, okay, you're here most likely because somebody at some point patted you on the shoulder and said you'd be good at that and gave you opportunities to do that. You're now that person, even if you don't see yourself that way. You need to identify the next group of leaders moving forward because we have 60 more schools to build, and we need all those principals. And we're going to have to develop those folks from the inside. We'll bring some quality people from the outside too, but I need you to identify the next group of people. And they may be leaders that stay in the classroom for 30 years, and that's great. But we're going to need people that roll into these other positions. So you're now responsible for doing that. I also let them know, the direct impact on kids, it's not as direct. Um, but what is direct is your impact on the adults that you work with. And there are people that I've had the pleasure of investing in over the years that will tell you they're doing something now that they never saw themselves doing before because I invested in them and helped develop it. And our principals and our other leaders, the expectation is each of those people are doing that throughout the organization. And um, the selfish part of that is uh, the feedback that you get from investing in people in that way, and then people doing things they never saw themselves doing before. That's the juice that keeps you going. Uh, where it used to be from the kids in the classroom, getting that. But now I still get back to schools, and I love to read. Where the Wild Things Are is my favorite book ever, so that's always the book that I read. So I get my kid fix from time to time, but in my role, it's investing in developing adults so they have the impact on kids.
That's really special. It's funny. I read something about you where they called you a pro teacher superintendent, and that's exactly what you sound like when you say that. Let me ask you this: who tapped you on the shoulder and told you you might make a good leader?
Um, there were a few folks. I give this guy credit, and his ego's already big enough. But Mike Hansen, who was the former superintendent in Fresno Unified, he was the principal at Laguna Creek High School, which was the second school that I worked as a teacher. I got to open it as a brand new school, transferring from Valley, um, and he gave me the opportunity. I saw a guy way smarter than me, that led in a way very differently than I lead. So I often joke because I learned as much as what to do as what not to do from Mike. But the ability to have an impact to see him come, he came from the outside to Laguna after it was already up and running, and he made a dramatic difference in what the school was and the focus on kids, and so he's been a mentor for sure. And I've had Bill Hewitt is another. He was the first superintendent that hired me in a principal position, so you can blame it on Bill that I kind of worked through all this. But same thing, being able to watch leaders who had to work through really challenging issues and how they went about that. That was they inspired me, and part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing.
Let me ask you one more question about your past. The Mineola superintendent who's been there for 20 years told me his favorite job was being a high school principal. And the superintendent of Orange County, which is the eighth largest district in the country, told me that the hardest job she ever had was being a K-8 principal. So tell me the best job you had and the hardest job you've had.
The principal job is a phenomenal job, um, and it was probably a better job when I did it, because
And it is
social
now.
media didn't exist, so it wasn't the crazy 24-hour 7 days a week piece, but that impact at a school site, um, really great job, loved it, and but really challenging as well. I mean, but really good work. You could still have that direct impact on individual kids, and so that was a big deal. I do think the job I'm doing now is probably the hardest one I've ever done. It's just crazy. I mean, it's the um, the sheer magnitude of it, um, and the responsibility for 62,000 kids and all the adults that are attached to them, and then the 7,500, 8,000 employees, and knowing that their livelihoods and everything to do with their families is dependent upon their work here at the district. So making it a great place for the adults and for the kids and families. Uh, it's hard, but it's a great job. It's nuts, and things happen that you can't plan for, and you just have to step in. Again, last Thursday when we thought that the building almost burned down because of the elevator transformer. But the reality is, I those are opportunities to just step in and just do what needs to be done, and that's probably a strength of mine. I don't shy away from that. I can step into that space, and I think it's hard to think of yourself in that way, but um, where you are, where you show up, and how you act in challenging situations. I tell my principals all the time. People are always watching. They're paying attention, and how you go about dealing with the situation. If they see panic on your face, they're all panicked. If they see that you're calm and you can close the door with me and let it go. I'm here for it. But in front of our people, you are the person that they're looking to know it's going to be okay. And so there's opportunities in this job to do that, there's opportunities to engage with law, which has always been an interest of mine. So this job checks a lot of boxes,
Yeah.
but man, is it some days, holy cow.
Yeah, I hear that. Let me ask you this. We started this conversation talking about the that you're kind of sailing into the last chapter of your career. So what is it that you have, what is bringing you hope? What are you most excited to see happen in education in the next couple of years?
Well, one thing I'll say is it's not broken. People from the outside will speak often about, uh, I'll take any one of my schools any single day, and you see what's going on, um, the quality of the teaching, the level at which kids are learning. They crush what we did, when we were in school. So it's not. So I have great hope that that people come to and say it's not broken. Can we get better? Absolutely, but there's it's a great place for kids. It's a great place for adults. I do think, especially the adults are still recovering from the pandemic. It was literally crushing. I know the medical field had that challenge, and education, we had the challenge of we were taking care of our own families, but we were also taking care of everybody else's kids at the same time. And so, there is still a recovery factor of that, and I don't think we're quite there yet. So people are still just emotionally and physically tired. But I have great hope for the systems we have in place. Again, these 300 positions that we added to our system through the pandemic. We're a better organization today than when the pandemic started, and then we have an opportunity to be set up for the future. So I feel really good about it, but there's a lot of things to get done to make sure that all becomes reality long term.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's fun because I can picture the young version of you being proud to be a teacher because now you just seem so proud to be a superintendent of your district, and it's really lovely. And your heart is just totally in it. Well, I have 5 questions that I ask every single guest, and so I'm
Yep.
going to ask you those 5 questions
All right.
now. So the first one is. At Amira, we call it more than a test because we think that we're on the next phase of assessment, but everyone hears that title and thinks it means something else. What did more than a test mean to you when you heard it?
Yeah. So again, for me, it's seeing the humanity of each person I engage with on a daily basis. Test scores are important. The some of the nuts and bolts about what we do, but this is a people business, and I'm responsible for making really important decisions and guiding work of the board and the staff. And as I do my work, keeping the humanity of each person I engage with on a daily basis in mind, and I know their hopes, dreams, and challenges. That's what this work is. It's tests. Again, I get it. There's certain things that need to happen, but that's not what the business is about.
I love that. And I love that you keep going back to the same thing. It's like your mantra, and it's really lovely. All right, give us a lit moment. And what I mean by that is a moment of you in a book that is either like your happy place, or it changed you, or it's just like something you think about. You in a book.
Okay, well, the book is leadership and self deception, and so uh, one of my strengths is, I have a tendency to find something that I think has value, and I stick to it. Part of it is I'm not smart enough to come up with another idea, but leadership and self deception, the core work is the outward mindset, the idea of seeing the humanity of each person you engage with on a daily basis. And one thing I'll say, it's really people will say, especially early in the training, well, it's just about being nice to people, and it's so much more than that. It's holding people accountable, um, but doing it in a human way. My expectations of people have never been higher than after doing this work, because that's the right thing to do for them, but it's also the right thing to do for the organization, the kids, and the employees here. So there's a very high level of responsibility and accountability that go along with the idea.
I'm definitely buying it right after this conversation. You got me hooked. All right, a piece of technology you love.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I'm probably the least technological superintendent you've ever spoken to. So I actually thought about this question a little bit. Is I don't think I love any single piece of technology. What I will say is my phone is incredibly useful, and so I find um, technology useful. And my phone, this is an interesting kind of dichotomy back and forth, is it keeps me connected to my work and my family in a way that I could never have fathomed before. And people will say, well, you need to disconnect from work. It's important for you to be able to do that. For me personally, being connected um, always, regardless of where I am, is better for me. Knowing that a problem has occurred and that we're working on a plan, a solution to deal with it, as challenging as it is, and even if I should be spending time doing something else at that moment, is way better for me than knowing something could have happened and I'm disconnected from it. And that I sleep better. I still don't sleep great, but I sleep better knowing knowing the problem exists and that we're working towards a solution than I do my head in the sand. I wonder how things are going while I'm disconnected, and being disconnected is good for me. It's not good for me, but that's probably not a really good. I'm not a good example for folks when I tell them you do need to get away. Um, but
I love that you say this, though. I feel like I'm somewhat the same. If I could just check in an hour a day wherever we are, I can be like, okay, nobody's waiting on me. Nobody's worried because I'm not available. Like it's about the other people too that are looking to me. So I love that you said that. I don't think most people are brave enough to say that.
So I've been a superintendent for 14 years, and I've been out of contact with my board for 1 week in that 14 years. And it was when I was in El Dorado on a cruise, and it was before you could get a tech plan to actually be connected. I got off the boat, my phone blows up, and my chief business official had a heart attack during that week. He survived, and everything was okay, but it was proof to me you just can't be disconnected.
The best advice you've ever been given.
Be honest, and be genuine. The work is so hard, and it's hard enough keeping track of everything that is true. Trying to keep track of falsehoods and keep all those stories straight. Not enough time on the face of the earth to do that. So just be genuine, be truthful. My experience is that people will take even really, really difficult, tragic news from you if they know you're genuine. So just be straight.
And I think you've already mentioned it a few times, but I'm going to ask for it anyways because it's where people get it at the end of the episode. A book you think everyone should read.
So Leadership and Self-Deception is a book I think everybody should read. And there's the Arbinger Institute. One other book that had a huge impact on me and was an opportunity for me to recognize really important people in my life was Tom Brokaw's The Greatest Generation.
Okay.
And so that was a 1998 book. It was I was teaching U.S. and world history, and so it was kind of in my wheelhouse at the time. But actually, after my grandfather passed, my grandmother gave me back the copy of the book that I had given to him. That recognized he was part of the greatest generation, and what they did, who they are, is why my family is who they are today. So that was one for me on a professional level that crossed over to the family side. That isn't leadership and self-deception. So The Greatest Generation. Good read too.
All right, I'm going to pick them both up. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're incredibly busy. I have some idea from looking at the articles of all the things that you deal with, but it's so lovely to get to take such a deep peek into some of the decisions you've made and the way that you look at your relationships. I think this is useful for everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for joining us on the More Than a Test podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. At Amira Learning, we believe every child deserves a chance to become a reader, and we're excited to be part of this conversation. See you next week, and thanks for joining.